Welcome to Lesson 6, covering TRIMS reporting features. TRIMS has several different reports that it can generate. First is the summary report, which is a simple graphical report showing the templates and risks and their risk levels. It allows you to see all of your risks in as few as 3 pages, and it's a good way to visualize the overall risk of your program. This report can be sent directly to the printer, or it can be exported directly to a PowerPoint file. The second report is a risk matrix report, which plots each risk on a large risk matrix. While not as useful as the summary report for seeing the big picture, it is more conventional and may be more readily accepted by your audience. This report has the same printing and exporting options as the summary report. The third report is the risk overview report, which displays the risks in a tree-style format, similar to a single column of the main display. The fourth report is the Risk Detail Report, also commonly referred to as risk worksheets. This report format displays information about each risk on a single page. This report has the same printing and exporting options as the previous reports. The last report is the Detailed Report, which is just that, detailed. This report is a text listing of the data in your element file. It can be saved as a rich text file that can be imported into any word processing program. When you look at the toolbar, you'll see a row of speed buttons labeled Reports. These buttons give you quick access to print or export a report. If you look closely at the icons, you can see that they resemble the reports that they represent. Here's the summary report, the risk matrix report, the overview report, the risk detail report or risk worksheets, and the detailed report. Let's take a look at each report in a little more detail. We're going to start with the summary report, so we'll click on the first button. The first block on the options page has space for you to enter a title for the report, which will appear on a cover page. You can leave this field blank, but then you won't get a cover page. Underneath the title, you'll find a set of radio buttons labeled Destination. If you want to export the report instead of printing it, simply select File Export. The next block displays either your current printer or your output file, depending on the destination that you've selected. In either case, you'll find a button on the right side of the panel which will allow you to modify your specific output settings. Under the printer settings is an option to call up the filtering dialog. The output from this report is based on the settings of the current filter, so this gives us a chance to review or modify those settings. Since we're generating a project summary, we really don't want to filter anything, so we'll take advantage of this feature and reset the filter to show everything. Moving on, we have a choice of printing either a single element or all of the open elements. By default, TRIMS will only report on the current element, which is displayed here. For this report, let's select all elements. The last block has a number of additional options for formatting your report. You can specify whether the report should be printed in color or black and white, and whether or not to force each element to fit on a single page. If you decide not to do this, and your font is too large, then your element may be broken across several pages. You can set the font type and style here. If you don't select the Fit to Page option, then you can also adjust the font size. A sample of your font selection is displayed in this window here. You can also decide whether your report should appear on a portrait or landscape page. For this example, the layout is set to landscape mode. This is normally the best choice for most element files. If you want to see what this looks like before you print it, click on the Preview button here. The Preview window will show you what your report is going to look like before it's printed. These two buttons here will allow you to advance from page to page. These buttons here will allow you to zoom in and zoom out of the image. If you're satisfied with the way your report looks, the Print button will send your output directly to the printer. Alternatively, this button here will close the window and return you to the Report Options dialog. Let's see what the report looks like if we choose not to fit it to a single page. Let's select a portrait layout and a 14-point font. Now, when we look at the preview, we can see that our element is displayed in pieces across several pages. Since this isn't what we want, let's go back to what we had and send it to the printer. Now, let's save the same report as a Microsoft PowerPoint file. After specifying File Export we'll click on the Output File button so we can specify a file name. Let's type in APM Summary and click on the Save button. After generating the report, TRIMS will check if we want to view the report in PowerPoint. We'll say yes, and there it is. By default, the PowerPoint version of the report looks exactly like the default print version, but it's possible to change this by using a layout template file. I'm not going to cover that here, but you can read more about this capability in the online help. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I don't see any hands up, so let's move on to the risk matrix report. Most of the options are the same as they are for the summary report, except down here at the bottom. There is no longer any option for specifying the page layout since this report can only be printed in landscape format, and there's a new option for page breaks at different category levels. This option is easiest to illustrate with product risks, so let's use the filter button to only show product risks. Got it? Good! Let's start with page breaking set to NA and take a look at our report. All of the product risks are shown on a single grid, which can get pretty crowded. If we set the report to break at category level 1, then TRIMS will start each top-level category on a new page. Now, the first page contains all of the B1 risks, the next page B2, and then B3. If we change this to second-level categories, then our pages will display all risks that start with B11, B12, B22, 23, 31, 32, and 33. The optimal setting for this option will depend on how many risks you have and how your categories are laid out. It may also be different for process risks versus product risks. Now let's take a look at the overview report. This time, there's no option for page breaking, but instead, there's a checkbox for expanding all categories. If this box is not checked, the report will display with categories expanded or collapsed exactly as they are on the main screen. For instance, if I reset the filter, then collapse all categories, and then manually expand the top-level categories in product risks and problems like so, and now display the overview report with the box unchecked, I get a report that looks just like the main display. If I check the box and redisplay the report, you can now see that the entire category structure is displayed and all risks are shown. This report is generally more useful for very large and complex systems and elements. The risk detail report is fairly straightforward, and there aren't any new options for this report. In fact, your only real options are whether to include all elements or not, and whether to print in black and white or color. There are a few things I'd like to point out about this report. First, the report is formatted a little differently depending on whether you are looking at process risks or product risks. The central area of the report is intended to show how the risk is being mitigated. For conventional risk management, that is, for product risks and problems, that means a list of specific action items that are intended to reduce the risk level over time. Each action item is displayed with its due date, and actions that have been completed will be shaded in gray. A burn-down display at the bottom of the page shows how each completed action will affect the risk level. The first diamond contains the letter I and represents the initial risk level before any actions are completed. As above, those diamonds that represent completed actions are shaded in gray. When you're dealing with process risks, however, the mitigation occurs as a result of answering the questions. Consequently, TRIMS displays all of the questions in each template, along with each question's current answer and weight. Next to each weight is the percentage of the total risk that each question represents. You can see that those questions that have been answered yes are grayed out, and there's no burn down display at the bottom of the page. This is because there is no way of knowing when each question will be completed, and there is no requirement for questions to be answered in order. The risk display in the upper right corner displays the current risk level based on the impact selected on the main display. The particular selection is also displayed here on the left side of the page. In this case, it tells us that we are looking at performance risk. Below the risk type, you'll see that all four impact values are displayed, and each is colored to show what the risk level would be if we were viewing that particular risk type. One last thing about the risk detail report. When you're viewing the main display, you can right-click on any risk and request a risk worksheet. This brings up an on-screen preview of the risk detail report for that risk only. It's intended primarily to give you a quick look at a particular risk, but you can send it to the printer if you want to by clicking the print button at the top. The last report is the detailed report. The options screen has most of the same options as the other reports. However, the filtering options are more significant here. This is where the last page of the filter options comes into play. The report options page shows most of the data fields associated with each template. By checking or unchecking each field, you can select which information should be included in your report. These fields here are template level fields, while these fields here are question level fields. For our purposes, let's assume that we want to generate a report showing all of the actions assigned to Drew Analyst. We'll begin by clearing all of the check marks, and then let's check the compliance status, the weight of the question, the reference information, the last updated date, and the current action item. Now let's go to the query filter and filter the data so that we include only those questions where Drew Analyst is the performer. There are two new options for generating an index and for inserting page breaks between templates. We can click the preview button and see what this looks like. I'll zoom in a little so that you can see this. As you can see, the information that we asked for is now displayed in a simple text format. As mentioned earlier, the detailed report can also be exported to a rich text file. We can simply select File Export as the report destination and then click the Export button at the bottom of the screen. Since we never specified a file name, TRIMS prompts us to enter one. After entering a file name and clicking Save, our report is generated. Now let's switch to Microsoft Word and see what this looks like. As you can see, the report imports very readily. That covers the reporting options. In the next lesson, we'll look at some of the other features that TRIMS has to offer.